All right, so let's get started. So thank you everybody for coming. As you can see, my talk is called Lessons from the Dojo. So it's really about what I've learned from my many years of martial arts practice and how it's helped me become a much better mentor, not just in tech specifically, but just overall. So a little bit about myself. My name is Miriam Goldman, and I'm actually coming to you up in Canada, up in our nation's capital of Ottawa. So I've been a web developer for over 15 years. As you can see, I work with WordPress specifically, but I love Drupal as well. I work with a lot of great Drupal developers over at Canopy. And outside of work, other than martial arts, I also do ballroom dance, play clarinet. So I like to joke that I'm working on doing them at the same time. And specifically with martial arts, I've been doing it for about 14 years now, and I'm actually a third degree black belt. So, as I mentioned briefly, I actually work for Canopy, and I just want to say that we actually are hiring. We are a great place to work. If you were at the session here in track one before lunch with Erin Lincolns and Erica Lewis, you'll know all about how we are working towards diverse and hiring practices. So as you can see, we're hiring for Drupal tech leads and developers, WordPress tech leads and developers, UI, UX, and some project managers. And I'm happy to just answer any questions you might have after. So let's get into it. You might be wondering, what are the benefits of karate? There is so many, but the top ones that come to mind to me are, first of all, self-confidence. So as you start to master skill, so you start learning your punches, your kicks, your katas, and you continue training. Once you just realize that, oh, look, I can do this skill, your self-confidence and your abilities grows, and it can just translate to anything you do outside the dojo. There's also self-discipline. So at the dojo, you need to be just present there. You can't really be thinking about anything else. You can't be thinking about what you're cooking for dinner that night. If you've had a very bad day or not, you need to be focused in on your techniques, on your katas, on your sparring. So this is just realizing that you have to just have your focus, be disciplined to be there. Related to this, there's also attention to detail. You really can't cut corners, especially if you are a fighter or a sparrer. Because if you get distracted or you're not following something, there is a huge risk for injury. And overall, there's dedication. So in karate, you probably know there are different belt levels, starting at white belt. So either you could use getting your next belt as a goal, or if you're a competitor, you can use tournaments as a goal. Any way you put it, there are ways to achieve goals, and you need dedication to reach set goals. So also, there's just etiquette that can be translated from karate to anything. So we have our Dojo Creed, which is recited before and sometimes after class. This is just a way to help center and focus you. Part of this also is respect with bowing. So when you enter the dojo, you bow to your sensei or whoever is teaching, and you go barefoot on the mat. So there's also having the right mindset. So you need to make sure that you are there to learn, not to socialize. Your mentors and leaders are not there to do the work for you. You have to give back. So it's almost like a two-way street. And also, you need to be receptive. So nobody is there to bring you down. Everybody there is there to help you, whether you are a mentee, a mentor, a karate sensei, a junior blue belt. Anytime you get feedback, it's not meant to be cruel. So going back to belt levels, I've thought that there's a really good analogy for using your belt levels from karate as a career progression. So you start a white belt in karate. That could be like you are either fresh out of college or you're coming to tech as a second, third, fourth career. You're just trying to figure out how things work, and you really are just trying to get your feet wet. Next up are the more intermediate belts. We move up to yellow belt and orange belt. So you've been there for a little bit, starting to take on some small projects and assignments. So you could see this as a junior developer who has really strong mentorship. We then move up to green or blue belt. So this is where you're getting more independence, more experience. You're starting to feel that you could add your creative voice, starting to take on a few more advanced or complex projects, but you're just not really leadership. So this would be mid to intermediate level devs, or even designers, if you want to put it that way. Then you reach brown belt. That in karate is your last belt before you hit black belt. And this in tech could be you're starting to take on a leadership role. You're starting to delegate, starting to mentor yourself. So you may still be a mentee, but you're also starting to take on mentorship for some really junior devs. Then you hit black belt. In my dojo, this is where you are officially now a sensei. So this is where you're really starting to take ownership of mentorship and leadership. So kind of think of this as a technical lead or junior management. But there's actually beyond black belt. There are higher dans or higher degrees. As I mentioned, I'm a third degree black belt. So I have gained a lot more teaching experience at the dojo, and I am involved in a lot of more mentoring. Pre-COVID, I was doing a lot of the children's programs. So you could see this as higher management, you're developing more leadership skills, but also another good way to put it is think of it as you're furthering your own education, as going on to get master's degrees or PhD degrees. But the question is, what really is a sensei? Sensei comes from Japanese. There's two characters. There's sen, which means before, and sei, which is life. So it's really literally one who has gone before you in life. So really, it's the same for mentors, except maybe not just life, but your specific technology that you're getting mentored in. So with that, what are some effective sensei characteristics? One, a sensei is patient. Not everybody learns at the same pace. You go at the pace and the level of your student, not your own. If you have multiple students, you find the person who needs the most time to learn. And just don't get frustrated or upset, just smile and reassure your students that everything's going to be okay, that they're not stupid or anything, that they will get it. Here's a big one: ability to adapt to changing situations. So you might have students from another martial arts discipline, or there might be a medical emergency. There's one actually in my third degree black belt test, actually, where one of my testing partners was a doctor and had to go tend to a medical emergency that just happened on our dojo steps. Or if you are a black belt yourself, you might just show up after a vacation and be told that you're running a belt test with no preparation. And a current example, too, is having to pivot to virtual classes with COVID. We've been running virtual classes at my dojo for 18 months, and my sensei has been doing a fantastic job in keeping us engaged, and I've actually learned more online. Part of this, too, is being a motivator. You are there to help the lower belts succeed. You want to share in their success and find ways to help them through what they are struggling with. There's also perseverance. It takes a lot to get to a point where you can teach. Good senses just don't give up on themselves or their students. They'll throw ever what bad things might happen along the way, whether they get injured in a fight, they lose a lot of tournaments, they get held back from a belt, they pick themselves up and take time to reflect, and then just move on. They're also a good listener. Just don't tune out your students. If they're having trouble with something or with a training partner, listen to what they have to say. Just don't dismiss anybody and ignore your own personal feelings. You are there as a leader. And most importantly, do not have an ego. Egos have no place in the dojo or as a sensei, as a leader. You need to be humble. So leading to that's a sensei. What are some good, effective mentor characteristics? They love to teach and learn. There's nothing worse than having somebody more senior to you or as a mentor who doesn't enjoy the teaching process. You can just tell that they're just checked out and just won't motivate you as a mentee. Why should I learn when they don't really care about it? So it's the same with learning. If your mentor is not constantly learning themselves and trying to better themselves, what does that say to you as a mentee? Does it really say that you really should be constantly trying to better yourself? They're also tolerant. We're human, at least last time I checked. Everybody makes mistakes. I'm going to use a developer as my example, but this goes for anything. So some people have different coding styles and methodologies. So just because it's not the way you personally would do it as a mentor, it doesn't make it wrong. Good mentors get their mentees to explain their process, and they just consider it. They might even pivot. There's no judgment. Similar to a karate sensei, they're also patient. Some people have that almost like aha, eureka moment or light bulb moment later than others. Some people need just a little bit more hand-holding and ask a lot of questions. Don't get upset at these questions. Just try and help them or point them to some good resources or other people. If it's not your strong suit, you know people who might be stronger at it than you, and help direct your mentees to those people. And they're also good listeners and communicators, just like karate senseis. You need to find a way to get the concept to stick. If you might need to find alternatives if one idea isn't working. Just try not to take the roundabout way to get to an endpoint. So the combined things for them, there's some commonalities. So they have passion for sharing knowledge. So both senseis and tech mentors have a lot of built up knowledge and skill, and they just don't like to keep it to themselves. They want to share with the world. They feel like they're bettering the world by passing on what they know. And if people take it and run with it, it's an extra bonus. They're also open-minded. They know that their way is not the only way. Sure, some things have to be done in a particular order, but in other things, there's absolutely room for flexibility and alternate methods to get to the endpoint. And they're also communicators. They learn how others learn. They learn what words to say and what actions to show. Really think of it as, how does my audience need to absorb this knowledge in the most effective way possible? So some of the lessons learned through this is that you need to lead by example. You need to walk the walk, talk the talk, that age-old analogy there. You learn how to deal with different personality types and learning styles. You need to figure out, how does one learn best? So in karate, we have our basic teiwaza, which is basically basic punches and blocks. So as a teacher, you learn to mirror it in front of your student, or they might want you to be side by side. Or in development, there's either just pure instruction, or there's peer programming or rubber duck programming. Just because you're a mentor or sensei doesn't mean that you can't learn from your juniors. So teaching a concept makes you think about it, and are you communicating effectively? And somebody who is your mentee might actually have something to bring to you. The big thing is the joy of the success of others. In karate, it's seeing lower belts being promoted. Black belt training and grading at my dojo is the most favorite part of my year. Pre-COVID, we would have a big ceremony, and I would get to help hand out the belts to our new senseis. That is just the most joyous couple of hours of a day. And then for developers, seeing them just get something, or they do their first big project, or they do this big task, and they just have this big smile on your face, or they Slack you or they ask you to hop on Zoom and say, look, I did this. It just makes you feel good. It just really lifts up the heart. And for me, it just makes my day personally when I see others succeed. So, what could you do? You need to find your passion. I'm using martial arts as an example and development, but it doesn't have to be that. It could be music, other sports. But honestly, if you have something that is outside your professional life that you feel could drive your professional life, go for it and try and integrate it. You should find your strengths. I'm not a fighter. I will never be a fighter, but I'm a technician. So I teach mainly the katas, and I mainly mentor the teens and those who might be underrepresented or in minority groups. So find what your strengths are in sharing knowledge and just latch onto them and grow from it. Always seek out more knowledge so it makes you more well-rounded and it feeds your passion. Never stop learning. I've said to some people in my life that if I don't learn something in a day, it was not a good day. So this also works for peer-to-peer mentoring or pair programming or whatever you do. And really, that is about it. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. And yeah, thank you.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself as well and just ask them. Is everyone sleepy from lunch? Okay. Well, maybe some people will follow up with you later. Oh, wait, no, here we've got a question.
What got me into martial arts? Yes. This is a kind of a funny story. So I was out visiting my uncle out in Winnipeg, and I was just constantly just getting out of breath when we were walking around the Parliament buildings. And so I actually started doing cardio kickboxing at a place that was near where I lived at the time. And then I just kept watching the karate classes that were right before my own kickboxing class. And I'm like, I could do that. And also, I'm of the age where Power Rangers was big as when I was a kid. And I really, really liked Mighty Morphin Power Rangers when I was in elementary school. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to give this a go and commit to it for 3 months, see if I like it. If I don't like it, no skin off my back. And yeah, here am I 14 years later. And my favorite Power Ranger was Billy Cranston, Blue Ranger. Because he was that really like always focused on his studies. And that was me when I was a kid. I was always focused on school and everything. And I hate to use the word nerd, but I guess that's how he was unfortunately portrayed. So, no, Billy Cranston, Blue Ranger. I also liked Kimberly the Pink Ranger too, just because of the gymnastics.
Just FYI, a Power Ranger talk would be amazing if that ever crosses your mind.
Maybe ideas. Maybe next year for next year's DDI camp, I'll figure out how to tie Power Rangers to tech.
But then you have to be careful because a bunch of the Power Rangers have gone on to be criminals. So, like the actors,
Yeah.
not the actual Power Rangers. I think they're fun.
No, I think we just focus in on like The ones from the 90s when it was still all kind of like following the same, I guess, storyline before Zordon like left and everything. Any other questions? Maybe not about the martial arts aspect of the talk, but more about the tech mentorship. Oh, that's a good question. How do you become a mentor when you have imposter syndrome? You find people to help support you and to quash that imposter syndrome. I still have it. I have it big, but I found people who have supported me. This is a true story that I only started giving presentations at camps. I come from the WordPress side, so I started at WordCamps. My very first one, I felt like it was a disaster. I gave it and I just didn't do it. But I'm using this as an example because it could also translate to mentorship. I found people to say, don't give up. Through mentorship, you build relationships. So I guess your imposter syndrome can come by having your own mentors. So you become a mentor by having mentors, if that makes any sense. Your imposter syndrome never goes away. You just learn to, I guess, deal with it better.
I think you also learn that everyone else has imposter syndrome.
Yep. Just because somebody looks put together and they seem like they are extremely confident doesn't mean that they don't have their own battles that they're fighting.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop